Hello, I'm Bruce Fetzer, President of the John E. Fetzer Memorial Trust. I'm here today with Akram Elias, former Grand Master of the Masonic Grand Lodge of Washington, D.C. We're here in the Detroit, Michigan Masonic Temple, which is actually located just 1 mile from Old Tiger Stadium. John Fetzer frequented this temple as part of his many, many trips to Detroit as owner of the Detroit Tigers. The Detroit Masonic Temple is the largest Masonic structure in the world. It houses more than a dozen distinct and beautiful lodge rooms that service both the basic Freemasonry activities as well as the higher York and higher Scottish rites. And we're here today to film Akram in the context of these lodge rooms.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to being here and doing it. And it's indeed a magnificent structure. Thank you, Bruce.
Thank you.
Well, Bruce, we're here standing in a lodge room, a typical lodge room, so I'm going to explain some of the key aspects of the furniture and how the lodge room is organized. In every regular Masonic lodge, there exists an altar. It is at the altar that the candidates for the degrees of Freemasonry take their obligation. Obligation is key to a Freemason, and it's freely taken. It differs from duty. And at the altar, one finds always the three great lights of Freemasonry. The first one is what we call the volume of the sacred law. Now, the volume of the sacred law could be any of the holy books. The person who's taking the obligation chooses the holy book in which they believe, depending on their religious background. They get to choose the book. The other two are very important tools in Freemasonry, the set of the compasses, and the compasses are used by the Mason, putting himself as a point and drawing a circle around him. And it is used as a tool to teach the Mason to always circumscribe his desires and passions towards all mankind, more especially, of course, a Mason. And the other tool is the square. And the square is a symbol of wisdom, and it is to teach the Mason that while you're seeking guidance from your volume of the sacred law, make sure you're always wise in your actions towards others and always circumscribe your desires. The three together are essential to regular Freemasonry. That's why we refer to them as the three great lights in Masonry. Now, during the ceremony, the lights in the lodge room are dimmed. And the candidate is typically blindfolded. So when the person blindfold is removed and the room is dark, there are three lesser lights that we see here, which will enable the candidate to see the three great lights. So the focus really is on the three great lights. And these three lesser lights could be old oil lamps, as you see here in this lodge room. they could be electric bulbs, and they could be candles. So there is no one way of having them. But the idea is that they will shed enough light to focus the attention of the candidate, that this is where everything starts. There are three key pillars in a lodge room. These are the three most important positions to really govern and manage the affairs of the Masonic Lodge. And the top position is right there, and that is where the worshipful master, that is the presiding officer of the lodge, sits. The worshipful master sits in symbolically what is called the east of the lodge. The east is where the sun rises, so it's the source of physical light. So symbolically in Freemasonry, that is the source of enlightenment. It is that person who has the wisdom, and for that reason we can see the square, which is the symbol associated with the position of the worshipful master, and the square symbolizes wisdom. You have the wisdom to be able to govern in an enlightened way, the Masonic Lodge. The next position, Bruce, we see it on the other side of the lodge, right there, and that is called the senior warden. Now, the senior warden represents strength. So wisdom is supposed to guide strength. Strength should not operate by itself because it can be destructive. So we need wisdom in how we employ strength. And the symbol associated with the senior warden is the level. And the level represents equality. So whenever we promote equality within the lodge, and therefore among us as humans, that is when we become really strong. Now, I forgot to mention the senior warden is in the west. The west, that's when the sun rises in the east and sets in the west. At meridian, the sun is in the south. So the south is where the third pillar, called the junior warden, sits to assist the senior warden and the worshipful master in governing the lodge. Now, that pillar represents beauty, because the whole idea of being a Mason, when you build, you gotta be wise in how you build. You have to be strong, because whatever you build must have a strong foundation. But very importantly, the purpose is to beautify the temple, to beautify your community, to purify the nation, humanity. So you're not building with strength to destroy, it is to really beautify. And the symbol associated, the tool associated with the junior warden is the plum, and the plum represents rectitude, that you need to be straightforward and upright in your dealings with others. Treat them fairly, equally, be upright, and that's when you really finally can be wise, is by balancing the two. We also see in a lodge room two pillars. The two pillars can move around the lodge depending on what is happening in the ceremonies. On top of those two pillars, we will see globes. Typically a celestial globe and a terrestrial globe, and that is to symbolize above as below, below as above. Of course, in this lodge room, you see beautiful pillars right on the right and left, flanking the seat where the worshipful master sits, because those pillars, again, that representing the duality. And wisdom is the ability to rise above the duality and put things at a state of equilibrium in this world.
Akram, we understand that the basic structure of Freemasonry involves the first 3 degrees. Could you please describe and explain the basic 3 degrees of Freemasonry?
With great pleasure, Bruce. There are 3 essential degrees in Freemasonry. The first degree is called the entered apprentice degree. This is the first step that a person who is not a Freemason takes into the society of free and accepted Masons. It is very important to keep in mind that the degrees of Freemasonry are really initiatic degrees. So we're a society that initiates individuals into Freemasonry. And the concept of initiation entails a transformation, an internal transformation of the individual. Now, the first degree, the entered apprentice, focuses on the first key aspect of the nature of a human being, and that is the physical self, the material world, the physical self that I have first in me and then in the material world in which I live. So the lessons of the degree, the ritual itself, focuses on how can a new Mason really master his, her physical self in a physical world. And everything that happens in that degree has always two levels of meanings. So the tools, the setup of the lodge room, the actual ritual initiation itself has always two levels of meaning. There is an exoteric. An exoteric means obvious. As the one person hears it and witnesses it, it has that level of meaning. And then there is a hidden level called the esoteric. And it's the esoteric that the person needs to dig deeper into in order to start the process, to launch the process of internal transformation. And that esoteric gets you a little bit into the hidden meanings of the symbols, because the language that Freemasonry uses is a language of symbols. It's intentional because symbols are very powerful, but one needs to dig beyond the veil, dig deeper into it. It's like taking an onion and peeling it. So the esoteric is key. If one does not focus on that, one misses the journey. Now, once we're done with the first degree, the next step for the Freemason is to go to the second degree, which we call Fellow of the Craft or Fellow Craft. The second degree focuses on the second key nature of the human being, and that is the intellectual self. We're not only physical, we don't live only in a physical world. There is part of us that is intellectual, and there is a lot of intellectual pursuit that needs to take place in the world in which we live. So in the second degree, the big focus is on intellectual pursuit, and specifically the 7 liberal arts and sciences. And typically in a lodge room, when it comes to the Fellow Craft degree, the Freemason is introduced to the winding stairway. This is a very important aspect of that degree. So we're going to step over closer to where the winding staircase exists in this lodge room, and we'll go over its significance. Well, Bruce, I'm right here standing. Both of us are by the winding staircase in this lodge room. For the second degree, this is an important symbol that is used to teach certain things that consists of 3 parts. The first part consists of 3 steps, and the 3 steps symbolize the 3 key tools that we find always in the Masonic Lodge. The first one being the plum, the symbol of rectitude that symbolizes beauty. The second one is the level, which represents equality and stands for strength. And the third one is the square, which is the symbol associated with the master and representing wisdom. The second part of the stairway consists of 5 steps. And the 5 steps symbolize the 5 classical orders of architecture: the Ionic, the Doric, the Corinthian, the Tuscan, and the Composite. And the third portion consists of 7 steps. And these 7 steps represent the 7 liberal arts and sciences that the Freemason, as a fellow craft in the second degree, is supposed to pursue, seeking knowledge in those. And they're divided really into 2 parts, 3 and 4, trivium and quadrium. The first 3 represent grammar, rhetoric, and logic. And these 3 have to do with communication skills. The next 4 are arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy. And as it is really in the first degree, and each one of the 3 degrees of Freemasonry, there is the exoteric level and the esoteric. So the exoteric is obvious, it's what I just explained. The esoteric, it is to make the Mason dig deeper and understand what does it mean to pursue the knowledge in these. Why do I need grammar, logic, rhetoric? Which one drives? Is it communication driving the knowledge? Is knowledge driving the communication? And what is geometry, esoterically? The deeper meaning of that. Why astronomy? And again, if the Mason misses that esoteric, deeper level of understanding of the degree, they are missing a big portion of the journey. I would say the essential part of the journey within the second degree. The third degree is the most fascinating, and that's where we touch on the mystical. So why don't we move to another part of the lodge room to talk a little bit about the third degree. So Bruce, once the Mason goes through the first degree, again focusing on the physical nature, second degree, which focuses on the intellectual nature of the human being, the culmination is the Master Mason's degree, which is the third degree, the highest degree in Freemasonry. Although one learns about what are called higher degrees in the York Rite and Scottish Rite, these higher degrees are basically higher in number, in levels, in order to help the Master Mason deepen her knowledge in what it really means to be a Master Mason, because that is the most difficult. This is where the big trial takes place. It focuses on the spiritual nature of the human being. And the purpose of the ritual is to trigger something within this candidate to become a Master Mason, trigger something within himself, within herself, to unleash something from within that will help him or her connect with the divine. So it is spiritual, and the exoteric aspect of it is explained, of course, through the ceremony. But there's always the esoteric aspect, and it is right there at the third degree that one learns about the mystical aspect of Freemasonry. And this is why it is the most difficult one, and it is the culmination. And if one does not get into that, one, of course, would have bettered himself, herself, by focusing on the esoteric aspects of the first, second degrees, and the exoteric of the third, which is really the spiritual. If that person misses the mystical, they're not going through that door, which opens a completely different world to the Freemason.
Well, thank you for explaining the basic structure and the first 3 degrees of Masonry.
It's my pleasure. My pleasure. Thank you, Bruce.